After interviewing 52 people in 52 weeks, I felt fairly expert in the 64 and more routine. That is, until my friend Kathryn Gallant came to my home on a quest to interview me about my year-long project. Spurred on by Kathryn's insightful questions, she and I pretty much ran the gamut of 64 and more adventures, from disasterous to miraculous. But more significantly for me, by the end of our 2+ hour interview, Kathryn had led me to some insightful realizations about myself and about my future, now that I have finally reached my 65th birthday. All of which brought 64 and more full circle.
Some of the interviews, when I hear the things that I ask and see that it's not offensive to people, I'm shocked by that. Because I would be offended if someone asked me that question.
Like what?
Oh, I asked Herb Kohler some questions that I thought were completely out of line. They were completely so personal. You know, I remember, because he's retired now. And I know him, you know, I don't know him socially like that, but we have spent time together previously, so it's not like I went in cold to that interview.
And you've had a connection with him through horses.
Yeah. And we've interviewed before, and that already sets the stage to make it easier. And we had a great interview, an interview that he reused with business magazines because he loved it so much. So I knew we had a good ground. But he's retired now, and I can't imagine what that must feel like, because work is his life. And so I said to him, do you miss being the big guy? Now, first of all, that's a little cheeky, right? And his answer was, well, you know, I still have this and I'm doing... And when he said it to me at the time, I just listened to it and said, okay. But when I saw it later, it was a little, like the body language is kind of, well, I still matter. I was like, I wasn't implying that you didn't matter, but I said, yes, I understand all that, but you know what I mean. Do you miss being the big guy? And he said, yeah. He would have just skated over that if I'd allowed it to happen. And I don't know why I didn't allow it to happen, because who am I to question him? But I did. Every interview I come out of, I have no idea if I got a good interview or not. Most times I think I didn't. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know. I have come from a life that has had challenges to it, and most of those challenges have been, and we've talked about this earlier, from the time I was a kid until through my marriages and adult life, I've always been annoying to people. Too much. Back up. Stop talking. Don't do this. All those things that make me who I am, they're now valued in what I do in these interviews.
You created a space for...
I can be me. And I think that's why I'm so happy doing this work. Because it's not that I'm overly educated or any... I'm just me. I can be who I am here, and it's not only okay, it's appreciated. And in some cases celebrated. How much better does life get?
But in the midst of all of this, you decided to leave your home of 17 years?
20.
20 years.
2 decades. Longer than I lived anywhere else in my life.
Your farm, Crown Hill.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear about what caused you to do that, what that was like. You went about disengaging yourself from Crown Hill in a fairly... You made a story out of it.
I did.
The first day of the last 30, the second day of the last 30, and now here you are in your new home, a new life, very different.
Very different, dramatically different, as they say, like night and day.
Yeah. So what was that like to be in the midst of this and in the midst of that at the same time? Well,
I mentioned about being in Nashville and back in that hotel room with my chicken barbecue sandwich in a hotel room that was, 5 by 5 and nothing particularly gracious about it because it was on a budget and nobody to talk to and nothing around me that I could relate to, because I am a person of, I like to see my mother's china or, my grandmother's quilt or whatever. And there was none of that, nothing. And I was just as happy as I could be. And at that moment, I knew that I could leave the farm. It was a 3,400 square foot house with 14 acres and a barn. And I loved it. It was my life. And it was the first place I ever felt really safe and secure. So it was important to me. And of course the book came out of that. And the book gave me a national platform where people around the country, around the world really, still read it and write to me. So on so many levels that house was crucial to my life. But at the same time it was my life. And if I wanted if I wanted the fulfillment I found in that crummy little hotel room in Nashville with my chicken barbecue sandwich, I couldn't keep the farm as well. So the house was on the market. I put it on the market in the end of May. And it was kismet the way it sold. It sold to people in Colorado who'd never seen it before, but who ended up being connected to the people who owned the house back in 1940. And it was just meant to be, and I was grateful for that. I also knew that it was probably going to be the hardest thing I'd ever done emotionally. So writing is what I do. So I started writing and posting every day on Facebook. And all of you, were so gracious in coming back, because about day 15, I was such a whine-a-thon. I was like, I wouldn't even want to read this anymore. So I started trying to write more funny things or uplifting instead of just always writing about, oh my God, I can't believe I'm leaving. And you were all so gracious and so kind. And because I lived by myself, there wasn't anyone to be there every day. So at night, when I would post, or I would post in the morning and then I'd be filling 53 bins during the day. And so by the end of the day, when I finally got to sit down and read, there were all your posts and comments about saying, you're doing great, or, oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing, or thank you so much. And you all made it so that I could get through and do it. And you gave me the strength and courage to believe that it was going to be okay. And what was really fascinating was that people started writing to me then privately and saying, okay, I'm doing this too, or here's what you need to know, and I believe in you, and thank you for doing this. And, that's like oxygen to a dying person when you tell a writer that you like what they're doing. And so I was so grateful that people read and didn't just say, oh, would you just stop already? Nobody ever did, and I was so grateful. I can define myself by me now. I don't have to define myself by that farm. The thing I never expected to learn in 64 more was that I'm enough. And I've learned that. And I'm grateful.
My last question for you is, what's next?
Well, I was supposed to have a book out this year called Beauty and Grace. I'm 15 chapters into it. It's probably a 35-chapter book. I want to finish it. And then I don't want 64 more to be for nothing relative to my career. One of the people I interviewed has a lot of connections, and she is going to try to help me get out to some of the major networks and see if anybody would be willing to allow me to do my work for them. There is something so incredibly exciting about thinking about telling the stories on television or on radio, on podcasts. I'd like an audience. Mm-hmm. And that's something I've tried to cultivate, and it has happened to an extent, but not like I think it could. Mm-hmm. I think people would enjoy these stories. So if anybody out there wants to hire me,